Hi, my name is Ellen Good, and I'm a lead staff and co-founder of WyldFlower Learning Community. We are a self-directed learning environment located in Sheridan, Wyoming. Today, Paul, my co-founder and also lead staff at WyldFlower, are just going to chat and open up just kind of a conversation about what's going on in our lives in WyldFlower and education and anything else that pops into our minds. So thanks again for joining us. And here's our conversation. So one thing that we like to do sometimes at the end of the day, I have a circle up with the older kids and Paul does one with the younger kids. So we're going to try this activity together. We talk about a rose, a thorn, and a bud. So it's something that's like, we're celebrating, something that we're struggling with a little bit, and then something we're looking forward to. So I'll take that over to Paul. So Paul, you're going to tell us kind of how things are going and just go through that process. Flower, thorn,
Yeah,
and a bud.
tons we could talk about in all these areas because there's lots of stuff going on and happening. um, I would say the thing that comes to mind, things going well, the flower. We have our oldest at WyldFlower is just about to start the dual enrollment with Sheridan College, and that's really exciting because you draw up what your pathways is going to look like, right? That's our high school program, and but you're not really sure what it is going to look like until you start to go through it. And I know you're working with the high schooler as well, so just hearing how things are falling in line for both those kids is really neat because it's actually happening, right? It feels more tangible now that we're at that point. So that's definitely the thing that's going well. And then there's challenges with that, right? Because learning and figuring out my role of a mentor, facilitator, how much help do I give? How much do I step back? Discovering that for ourselves as we go through this. I think that's a big challenge. And it's a new year, so, right, trying to prioritize everything, looking at the challenges that are going on. It's a really healthy process and it's exciting, but it makes you realize, like, oh, we still have this to finish with the makerspace, and what are we going to do now that it's getting colder and we have less time to go outside or be in parks necessarily, right? So a lot of transitions happening, which can bring some challenges, but they're all good. And so and then what I look forward to is definitely what this looks like, not within just WyldFlower, but Sheridan community as a whole. As I feel like since COVID, we're still in those kind of societal shifts a little bit here and there, right? What was maybe not working before COVID is making us shift and think of new things differently. I think education's one of those things, right? I think education, there's been a lot of questions of like, okay, what are we doing and why are we doing this the way we are doing it? I think parents had a chance to see a lot of that when their kids were at home. Anyways, and making them think, okay, is there another way to do this? So I look forward, like, with my own evolution of what self-directed learning looks like and all the benefits of it when you look at a scientific perspective in the sense of psychology and neuroscience. There's a lot of potential there for this shift to happen and more self-driven kind of learning happening. And I'm excited to see what that looks like within the Sheridan community. If it changes that direction, or maybe things stay as they were before, but I don't think so. I'm skeptical of that. I think.
Right. Yeah, that reminds me of the Naomi Fisher podcast you were talking about the other day. And then I had somebody asking me about best practices, which I think ties back to your thorn, where like it's the art of education. It's the art of being in relationship with somebody who, maybe needs some guidance and some support from you, but when do you step in and how does that look? And I mean, we talk about it all the time, knowing the moment to like get your hands out of it, right? And like you want to be supportive and you want to be the guide on the side and you want to be there for whatever that they need, But the second they don't need you, you need to feel that moment and you need to just get your hands out of the way and let them own all of that success and all of those big milestones. Like starting dual enrollment, he like what a transformational story he is. He's so exciting. And not even because he's going to college, right? Like it's cool that
Right.
he's doing something that he's decided to do. He's had some obstacles and some roadblocks that he had to navigate. Um, like that whole process, just him accomplishing something that he decided he wanted to try is so exciting. But I think the art and
Yeah.
science, right? Like we come back into that conversation all the time. Like, I just think we've come to a point societally where I think we've asked too many good questions since the pandemic. Like I just think there's too much good information coming out now, and I don't know what changed the conversation exactly, but it just seems like everything's coming together. Like you can't go back to what it was before. Like it would be disappointing, I guess, if we all like put our heads in the sand and decided, transition is hard and I don't want to change and that we'll just do what we've always done. I hope we've come too far for that.
So how about you? What would you share? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had a totally different rose, like flower, and then like I don't know what is it, like 45 minutes ago, maybe our phone started blowing up. It's been about like roughly an hour or so since
Oh
they
yeah.
sent out a message to the kids,
Yeah.
right? So then, so then that's just taken over my last hour. I think I put it on our Facebook page as a reel too. Like I popped it up and I just blocked out everybody's name. But we sent out a message to a group of kids at school that are pretty much everybody's on a group thread together that has a cell phone. And we just had to ask permission to have somebody visit and stay for the day tomorrow because that's how we do it. We ask permission and get votes and that whole thing. So, anyways, they were responding to that and like they're just so excited to come back.
They
That
are.
blows my mind. I have my
Yeah.
own Harlow who's like, "It's time to go. Is it time for school? Is it Tuesday? Is it when?" They're just she's jazzed to be back. But then to see like, teenagers who are, and we miss you, and we want to be back together, and I have my own high school student who doesn't come to WyldFlower with us, and I've been hearing for the last 3 days, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I'm not ready. So, like we have the best job ever. I'm just like celebrate the fact that
Yeah.
WyldFlower
We are
exists
lucky.
and that all these kids want to be there. Like that just blows my mind still. I'm still not used to that. So I'm celebrating that. Thorn. Over December, I lost track of my scheduling and I have like so many hours worth of social media stuff to plan and post that I have been putting off. So that's been my challenge. I'm trying to like rein it all in now that it's January, and
Sure.
it's a good time for a reset and like you said, getting all the things in order and in a row. And then the thing I'm looking forward to. So we just found out after like a year's worth of work and relationship building that we got picked up by a large national foundation, a partnership with a national nonprofit that is dedicated to supporting families choosing where their kids go to school. So we don't have school choice in Wyoming, and there's lots of places that still don't. No vouchers, nothing like that. So this gives families in Sheridan the option to apply, and if they have financial need, then they can qualify and be able to choose to send their children to private schools that are tuition based. And WyldFlower is one of those. So we're now on the list, which is super exciting, and I'm really looking forward to like how that's going to impact our space and how that's going to impact the community, and just super grateful for that partnership. So it's called ACE, and we are very, very excited.
Towards that. It's exciting to have it for sure. Have it for sure.
Well, oh man, their mission is so cool, and the crazy thing about them. One thing I'll plug it while I have the moment. they don't necessarily like support WyldFlower. They'll support the family and the kid. So if the kiddo chooses like, jobs change or whatever, family has to move, they stick with that kid until they graduate from high school. So it's not like 1 year to 1 year to 1 year where you're like, I don't know, am I gonna get it? Am I not gonna get it? Can I stay?
Yeah,
Like if the
it's
kid
huge.
moves and they want to take their tuition with them, they can, which is just mind blowing. So that's really yeah, I'm so excited. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah. So what have you been listening to, reading? What's in your world right now?
So we're lucky. In about a week and a half, we're going to have Peter Gray as a guest for one of our parent after hour, uh, our month class with parents. And so, yeah, because he's coming, I've been listening a little bit more of him on podcasts and checking out his blog and those things. So yeah, and whenever I run into like his work or Naomi Fisher or Gina Riley, I inevitably like hit all three of them because I feel like they complement each other so well, right? Peter Gray is a researcher, being on the outside. His kids are all grown up now. He did have one kid who went through self-directed learning, um, but yeah, he comes from a certain perspective of research and like child development. And then you have Naomi Fisher, who, her job for a long time. I don't know if she's still doing this. I don't think so anymore. But diagnosing kids and like trying to set up plans with schools to help the child within that school environment. And then Gina Riley, who studies self-determination theory. So, anyways, like listening to Peter Gray talk about mental health issues and of anxiety and depression specifically, and how he sees the research showing that it's a lack of autonomy and free play, especially, right, is his perspective. He studies play and those things, and how schools are set up. Anyways, and then, all Gina Riley with self-determination theory, pointing out like what type of environment would foster a healthy, environment to develop physically and mentally. And then Naomi Fisher, in her own way, pointing that out. So, yeah, I've just been listening to mostly Peter Gray, but then running into the other two as well as I think about something or have a question that I'm trying to figure out. So, yeah,
I emailed Naomi Fisher just the other day because I
nice.
had a question about mental health. I wondered if there were any numbers in on that, like because I'm working on a grant right now, and so part of what I wanted to highlight was really how powerful a space like ours is, how self-directed learning environments positively impact mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
there's just not a ton of data on kids, like hard
Yeah.
data. I'm looking for this percentage, this number. There's some within like governmental distributions, but not about self-directed learning. So, that'd be our national baseline. I was looking for those, and so I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it. So I emailed her, and I'm like, do you have any place I should be looking? Because intuitively and watching kids in our space, I know that it works in that it supports mental health in huge ways. I just couldn't find the
Mm-hmm.
numbers, and so that's funny that you mentioned it because she told me to look up self-determination theory, like get the guy's data that initiated that originally. And she also mentioned a book. Have you read Drive by Daniel Pink? Have you heard of that one yet?
Talk on his book, but I've never read the book.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah,
anything
I
about
think
it.
he
Was
has
he
a book
talking about
author. He has
self-determination theory?
yeah, that's a big part of it. I think in it he talks about the study of um, kids who were told they'd get a certificate for an art contest or something like that, and essentially the group that was given no certificate and just asked to do something creative, I can't remember exactly what they were told, ended up doing better than the groups that were scored and ranked. Um, so yeah, and I think like intrinsic motivation, he talks about like external pressures and rewards, how it undermines the drive for kids to keep going, you know. But that's just a gist of it. Again, it was like a brief, uh, presentation he did. I haven't gotten into the book though. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I haven't heard about the
Sounds
book, so
interesting.
that's one that I've put on my list for sure to
Nice.
get into. Is there any one like thing Peter Gray was talking about that like really stood out to you
With
that was
the mental health piece we were just talking about, he's extremely strong in his language when it comes to the environment of the traditional school system. So, not teachers, not administrators, right? He's not talking about people. He's talking about the environment and the system and what the consequences are for that, inevitably, just because of how it's set up and how detrimental it is towards the mental health of kids. And yeah, like his point of view is we need to be shouting this from the rooftop. You know, when we look back, if and when we transition out of this type of schooling, you know, in mass, it'll be seen as child slave labor to a degree, right? Like what we're making these kids go through and the lack of respect towards their humanhood and, you know, having the ability to make choices in their life. Um, you know, yeah, it's going to be one of those things where we're scratching our head thinking, what were we doing necessarily? So yeah, he's really been vocal in the last couple podcasts of, I think it was the CDC, it might have been the American Academic of Pediatrics, or sorry, Academy. Um, I think it was one of those two, but they did studies trying to figure out surveys figuring out what is causing stress on kids, like why are we seeing this spike in teens specifically. I think it was like between 15 and 25 is the most stressed out group of people in society, and that hasn't been the case before. So what's going on there? And what I had been listening to, right? You get a lot of people blaming tech, um, or you know the generation themselves of how kids are lazier nowadays, or they're just not as tough or soft. You know, you hear a lot of things going on.
yeah, we blame the parents
I don't
and
know. There's
families.
yeah, parents. I I think he mentioned the highest stress for them is school itself. It might be like a tough home life, might be up there too. I don't know, can't remember exactly, but I know for sure school is top two. Um, and he points out,
When he was talking with
and he
the
points
Rethinking Education podcast, that's exactly what he
out,
said. He said that they like when they're answering the question themselves, school is the highest impact on their stress level.
yeah,
It's scary.
you and I as teachers in the space and administrators in our different ways saw like okay, you look at self determination theory and what it states, and then you look at the school situation and a kid's day to day, and it's like so far opposite ends. It's crazy. And then what we do as professionals in that realm, because we're trying to do something about it, but right, this is federally set stuff, and the incentives are pushing us towards this. So there's really nothing at that level can be done. But you try to like, you know, do little tricks within the classroom to try to get some more self-determination theory going on, but it's just such a small amount. Like it's you know, it's just not enough to really help these kids develop strong mental health. And instead, we're just trying to mitigate the damage, right? And I think so. That's what Peter Gray really talks to. Naomi Fisher, um, I think, really well. And so, yeah, it's being able to see it and now being outside of it. And I think the survey's right there, right? Like, so kids are most stressed about school. Peter Gray points out there's studies showing suicide rates are higher at the end of a break when you're about to go back to school because school is so stressful. And then you've got the thread of kids that you just talked about who are like, I can't wait to get back to WyldFlower. So it's to WyldFlower. So it's
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah.
The
It's
data's,
contrasting
it's
so
we need to figure out how. Yeah, we need to figure out how to
yeah.
formalize. For the most part, I don't. This is most of the kids. Um, the opposite um, situation is happening for them, where I think our school is a space where they're developing themselves and they feel it, right? They feel, and it's just a place that they're connected and they want to be there. So that's a totally different world than the attitude of ah, I'm, just don't look forward to this at all. I'm stressed out. I don't want to go back to school. I wish I had another week of break. Like those are two different worlds. Um, and this is a question I'll let you go, but I'd be curious what your thought is. I heard on the radio driving home the other night, shared media, hospital intake, right, is going up 20% for mental health, emergency mental health situations where we need more beds, right? So they're sectioning off a part of the hospital to develop that, from my understanding. And how it's frustrating at this point, and I'm wondering what we do about the mental health challenges we have when I feel it's in our face. Like there's things we know what we can do. And I think one of those big things is giving more autonomy to a child, because we just know that leads to better mental health outcomes as adults. We just know it at this point. So what are you listening to besides what we talked about? And then I guess what would you wonder?
So Naomi Fisher talks about how a lot of times the school system, again, not people, not teachers,
Mm-hmm.
not the
Yeah.
human beings, but the structure creates the system, right? So in the beginning, she was a clinical psychologist who was getting referrals from the school districts where she is. And I was listening, you had sent me a podcast, and it was with Dick Covington, and it was episode 122 of the Human Restoration Project. Super good. But she was talking about how the school system would send a kid to her to fix, and then in turn make them better at being inside the system, this structure that doesn't work for human development, really, like not just the one child, but for the breadth of children. Um, so that got me like, what the heck is Human Restoration Project, and what are they doing, and where are they, and who are they? Because if Naomi Fisher likes them, then I probably do too.
Yeah.
So this one blew my mind. Okay, so it's a different one. It's a YouTube video that I was, as I'm like deep diving into this thing, which you should all check it out. Uh, it's very cool what they're doing, the work they're doing, their mission, their vision. It's awesome. So a different episode, and it's a YouTube video, and it was talking about hyper reality is like the time period that we're in. So, you construct your reality based on your experiences and your lens, and my reality is so it's not, no one person is having the same experience. But he gets into this part where he's talking about what if AI takes over as teachers in classrooms. And at first I was like, that's crazy. There's no way. There's no way, right? And then the more I thought about it, and I talked with Cody about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's terrifying on one hand. And then in that same vein, it made so much sense after I started thinking about it from like the school structure perspective and point of view on education. So then as I'm watching this, and he's talking about this particular computer, which is called the GPT-3, I think I'm getting it right. So it's this really, really intelligent AI, but it can't decipher truth. It only knows most probable solution.
Oh.
So you get into our really complicated politics, for example, and the misinformation and false news and who's got this story and what really happened. So this thing called GPT-3 would take what's the most probable but it wouldn't be necessarily the truth. It would be like the most or the loudest or, the most amassed data would be what it would decide was the truth. So in it, you wouldn't be able to teach a critical thinker. You wouldn't be able to like prompt for, no answer or curiosity or wonder or anything like that, but you would be able to give a right answer, to teach a right answer, and then like to ask for a right answer on a test, which freaked me out. After I sat around and thought about then what's the point of school? Like, how do you think most people would respond? Like, why do people go to school? What's the point?
I've heard a couple main things: go to college to get a good job, or that it also somehow prepares you for the real world workplace. Those are like the main ones, I guess I've heard.
Right. So I was thinking those are ones I've heard too. Like, you become part of the economy, you're going to be,
Yeah.
sufficient, part of the national GDP kind of a thing. But I've also heard people say that you go to school to get educated.
Yeah,
And then I was
absolutely.
thinking,
Yeah, I've heard that
okay,
too.
like if we go to school to get educated, then what is education for? And I think that's right when you go into it's so that you can become a productive member of society and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if your job as a public school, standards based, even in private schools, if your job is only to teach these standards to kids, and we really just like wholeheartedly agree that that's the correct education, the best way to assure equal basket of goods, no deviations from curriculum, no going rogue, no pushing back, none of that is AI teachers. It's terrifying, but it makes so much sense when you start to think about what's the variable between districts, what's the variable between states. And so Cody and I were talking about it, and he was like, yeah, but AI is creepy. Like, can you imagine a bunch of robot teachers in a school with small children and like, developing human? And we were talking about the experiment with the monkeys that like had the robot mom and then like the squishy soft also robot mom and like nurture versus nature. But then we got to talking and I was like, here's what you do. Make them all giant stuffed animals in elementary school.
That's what I was, yeah.
And like make them cool cartoon characters in middle school and junior high. And then I don't know what you do in high school. They're too smart for all that. But like it would be like class mascot. Like, can you see it? It's terrifying. It freaked me out so bad. But it's like I've been mulling it all this time because you could stick, like a unicorn in a rainbow. Just pick a fluffy big mascot and push right answers all day long. Because if that's really what we've decided is the right thing to do, AI makes the most sense, and that scares me to death.
Right. I mean, you could see where the incentives of funding and those things tied with state assessment and how you do on standardized tests. Man, just since my time of being in education, things have become more streamlined and robotic, even as the teacher, right? Having more what your class should look like and what you're getting the kids to do. The more nowadays, more so than say when we were in school, I would think in general, no matter what class you go to, the feel within that classroom is the same, whether you're in math or English or whatnot, right? Like the flow of the class and the questions asked and how it looks. The content's different, but that's about it. And it does, right? It does squelch that uniqueness of each person and their ability to really develop these human traits, these human skills that are actually what are going to keep us relevant against automation, right? Like really the opposite of that.
I can see where it's eventually going to make sense to somebody, and they're going to try it somewhere. What was it? I think it was in Florida.
Yeah.
When I was going through my master's, I was looking at something, and in Florida, I think they had some teacher training program, and they were taking people that weren't in education as a education for education. They were taking professionals who wanted to change jobs, and so a lot of the curriculum, like the teacher's guide, would have a script, and you only said what the thing said, and then I say this, okay, now class, now you say this, we da 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 da, and then the kids repeat it back to you, and I was like, oh man, if that's all you need to do to be a teacher, that's all you need to know how to do, and then classroom management, which is, I mean, a human is subjective there too. What bothers me might not bother you, so I'm not gonna, I'll attend to things you don't attend to, and vice versa. So then, behavior management from a robot also makes a lot of sense, which again, terrifying. But if that's the point of education, it's just to have a right answer and then to regurgitate the right answer, and that's the point, then I can see where it makes sense. But then you get into there's a documentary, was Most Likely to Succeed. Is that the one? We're just talking about like high grades and what do I have to know to be on, what's going to be on the test? What do I have to know to get a good grade? And like what that does for your life. It just is not, it's not the predetermination for a happy, healthy, whole human being. So, we have to decide what is education for, and why are we sending kids to school for, 7 and 8 hours a day throughout a whole year? What is the purpose?
There is what you've talked about with the AI or technology, at least, being used to a degree that we're not used to. I know we've been, the U.S., when I say we, our model of schooling, we've more and more started using strategies from like China, say, these places that historically have tested high in like the PISA test scores and those things. So they use cameras within their classrooms, right? And then have sensors on the children, and these cameras can detect when kids are off task. And so then it'll send them. So then it'll send. And we were already doing, like, as a teacher, I was using programs to watch and monitor the kids' computers to make sure they were on task with what I had them do. And like for most people, I suppose if you haven't thought about it, it's like, well, yeah, of course you want the kids on task and learning what you're trying to teach them, but I mean, really, what's being learned is existing in a surveillance state, right, where we're training our kids to live in a place like China, which actually, like, their government does do this to their citizens, right? And we seem, well, we have been up to this point against that, I would say, as far as the society in general, right? Whether you're on the left or right politically, we don't think the government should be watching us and deciding how we should live. And yet we're doing that to our children. And we're not looking at the data showing, like, that's what's actually going to teach. Like, they're going to learn a lot out of that. It's not the content you're trying to get them to learn that's going to stick. It's these unintended consequences of conformity and not being able to think for oneself. There's a lot of detriment. And someone like Yang Zhao, who's from China and now is an educator in the U.S., will point that out. Like, we don't want to keep going down that road. So
that is bananas. I have not. Oh man, like we were teasing about putting a video in the mat room today, but not seriously.
Yeah.
Like
no.
It's like when you get meds, right? You get meds and you have it, and it's supposed to do this one thing, but then they have to tell you all the other things that could potentially happen to you from taking said medication. Like, I feel like standards-based education needs to list off all of the hazardous outcomes, and then families could decide at the end, like, is this really going to be like what's best for our family? And is this really what we want for our children? we just don't talk
Yeah,
about those the side effects, just the unintended side effects.
right. It's impacting our local community. I would argue in the sense of, again, hospital beds, being increased because of mental health issues and not being able to provide services for all the people who need it. Um, and Peter Gray, back to what he was talking about, when the CDC or the AAP, whoever conducted the study, released this, they actually didn't talk about the findings specifically on schooling. It's taboo. So, like, if you say I'm against school, that sounds really bad. It sounds like you're a bad person, right?
Yeah,
Right? Um,
right.
it's we're in a society where we argue it's good for kids to be in school. Now, it depends on the child and what's going on, and there's some great things that I remember being a student. I have family members whose kids are still going to the standard school system. And it's cool to watch them in the organizations that they're in and the clubs and the sports that they're doing. And like, so I'm not, it's not bad across the board. And the people, right? We talked earlier, it's not the people, it's the system. So like great coaches and teachers and those like at a personal level, really talented too, at instructing. Um, but it's so much of a child's life, and there's so much data showing that this is causing, well, problems. It seems like directly, it doesn't seem like a correlation thing. So I think there's times I wish we took as much energy on our fears of tech and trying to manage that, and put that energy towards like, let's really think about schooling, what we're doing. What is it? What does education mean, right? Like asking these questions so that we have these assumptions that lead us to these better outcomes. Because right now, the assumptions I see are, how do we rank statewide, nationally, globally on these narrow tests? And we haven't really looked at if those correlate to actual like skills in life later on, um, generally. So, anyways, that's definitely something I'm wondering about.
So in that YouTube video I was watching from the Human Restoration Project, he gets into progressive education. And like prior to being so deep into the self-directed and self-determination theory, like when I was just starting to like come out of, wait, there's got to be a better way than what I'm seeing and doing in the classroom and what my own children are experiencing and like what I'm seeing around me. As I'm emerging and starting to question the system and like, the matrix and all that, I saw, I watched that documentary, Most Likely to Succeed, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is definitely better, right? This is a step in the right
Mm-hmm.
direction of things. But this guy criticized that in a way that made so much sense because even when I watched that, I remember when they got to the final like group project, it was so complex and it was so well planned. And if a student didn't finish it didn't derail the whole group project, right? Like one person
Mm-hmm.
could fail and experience that failure, but it wouldn't cause failure for the whole group. And immediately I was like, well, that's a student or that's a teacher designed project. That is not a student design project because it just wasn't. So even then I was like, wait a second, there is an agenda underneath all of this. This
Mm-hmm.
is not
Sure.
completely student led. It's just more student led. And so then he was talking about how so often, like, tech comes in and it looks really good, and like we get a smart board and everybody's got an iPad and there's all this gamification going on and it's cool. But when you come back to it,
Mm-hmm.
it's a new version of an old system. Still, it's still teacher driven. It's still prepackaged curriculum. It's still standards we're going to hit. We're just going to hit them in a fun way. And you're going to like it while we do it. And if you don't, I don't know
Yeah.
what to tell you. Sorry, we'll have to do it. Like it's still a chalkboard and it's still a notebook full of lesson plans that the teacher, has to stick to. It just looks different. And so then you look at these amazing schools, highly funded tech driven schools, and you're like, oh, it's a new thing. And then you stop and you're like, wait, it's not a new thing. This is the old thing. And it just looks like kids should
Yeah.
like it better and, maybe not hate it as much or whatever. But
Yeah, it's just
they're still not asking kids what they want to do and what they're passionate about. And it also still treats education. This is another thing that bugs me. As I started to do some research and dig into this more, it still treats a child like a cog in a machine, and their purpose for our nation is to be financially productive, not not to determine for themselves like what does a fulfilling life look like for me as an individual. It still holds really firmly into a capitalistic perspective, but it also gets like weird when you don't necessarily have all this say in what you decide to do. Like you should do, these high paying jobs and you should be part of these kinds of industries. And our school system really funnels kids into those rather than saying, like the world is open to you. What do you feel like you want to do? How do you want to develop? What does productivity look like to you? What does rest and balance and health look like? It still has all these predetermined outcomes for kids that that part I was like, oh, yeah, it's shiny and it looks cool, but underneath it's
yeah,
still got that subversive thing.
yeah. It's still lacking all of the support you'd want for healthy human development, right? So
Yeah. We'll try and link all the resources that we talked about in the notes on this video too. So we'll plug in the Human Restoration Project and the podcast that Paul's been listening to and checking out. We're happy to share resources and keep the conversation going. All right. Well,
all right.
I'll catch you later, Paul. See you at work.